The call came on a Tuesday, a day so aggressively ordinary it felt like a personal insult in retrospect. I was on a stepladder in my sun-drenched living room, meticulously taping the edges of a window frame, preparing to apply a final coat of whispering sage paint. The house, my house, was a symphony of small, hard-won victories. Every restored floorboard, every replanted rosebush, every perfectly skim-coated wall was a testament to 3 years of my own sweat, savings, and sacrificed weekends. It was more than a structure of wood and plaster. It was the physical manifestation of my independence, a fortress I had built for myself after a lifetime of feeling like a guest in my own family. My phone buzzed against the paint-splattered denim of my overalls, the caller ID flashing Mom and Dad. A familiar low-grade anxiety coiled in my stomach. Their calls were rarely just to chat. They were communiques, status updates on my younger sister Chloe's latest triumph, or, more often, thinly veiled interrogations about my own, less glamorous life choices. I clicked the speakerphone button, dabbing a brush into the pale green paint. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. You've caught me mid-project." There was no warmth in my mother's voice, just a clipped efficiency that always set my teeth on edge. "Ilara, we need to talk. It's important." My father mumbled a gruff hello in the background, his usual role as silent, stony reinforcement. "Okay," I said, carefully drawing a clean line of paint along the trim. "What's up?" My mother cleared her throat, a sound like gravel being sifted. "Your father and I have been discussing things with Chloe. She's ready to settle down, to buy a proper home. She's done so well for herself at Apex Development, you know, a big promotion. We're so proud." I hummed a non-committal agreement, waiting for the inevitable punchline. It was always about Chloe. Chloe, the prodigy, the social butterfly, the one who'd followed their prescribed path of a business degree and a corporate climb, while I, the artistic one, had stubbornly pursued architectural restoration. "That's great for her," I said, my voice flatter than I intended. "And," my mother began, drawing the word out, "we've come up with the perfect solution for her housing situation. It's really ideal for everyone." A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into my bones. I stopped painting. I knew, with the certainty of a gazelle scenting a lion, that this solution involved me. "What solution, Mom?" "Your house," she stated, not suggested. The words were hard little pellets fired down the phone line. "It's perfect for her. The neighborhood is lovely. It has that garden she's always wanted. And it's time you stopped rattling around in that big place all by yourself anyway." I almost dropped the paintbrush. I gripped the top of the ladder, my knuckles white. "What, my house?" "Mom, I'm not selling my house." A sigh of profound, theatrical disappointment whispered through the speaker. "Ilara, don't be difficult. This is for family. Chloe is willing to give you a very generous price. She's prepared to offer you what you paid for it 3 years ago." The audacity of it stole my breath. What I paid for it was the price of a dilapidated, condemned shell. I had poured over $100,000 of my own money and thousands of hours of my own labor into resurrecting it. The current market value was nearly 4 times the original purchase price. "What I paid for it," I repeated, my voice a strangled whisper. "Are you insane? That doesn't account for the renovations, the market increase, anything. That's not generous, that's theft." My father's voice finally boomed, full of righteous indignation. "Theft? Don't you dare use that word. We are talking about helping your sister, after all we've done for you. Is a little family loyalty too much to ask? You've had your fun playing carpenter, but it's time to be practical. Chloe needs this. I need this," I shouted, my voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room I had so lovingly restored. "This is my home. I built this life for myself. It's just a house," my mother snapped, her voice turning to ice. "And we are giving you a choice. You can be a good daughter and sister and sell the house to Chloe for the agreed-upon price, or you can consider yourself no longer a part of this family. We will not have a selfish, ungrateful child. You will be disowned, Ilara. Do you understand me?" Completely cut off. Disowned. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It wasn't a threat. It was a verdict. "Sell my soul or be erased." Tears of rage and disbelief pricked my eyes. I have to go," I stammered, my hand shaking as I fumbled for the phone. I ended the call, the silence of the room rushing in to replace their venom. I slid down the ladder to the floor, my back against the wall, the scent of fresh paint suddenly nauseating. My home. They were trying to rip my home away from me, using the only weapon they knew I was vulnerable to. Their love, or the conditional, transactional thing they called love. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, the sun creeping across the floorboards I had sanded and stained myself. My mind was a maelstrom of shock, hurt, and a fury so profound it felt like it might burn me up from the inside. How could they? How could Chloe, who had visited exactly twice and complained about the dust both times, feel entitled to the literal fruits of my labor? The house was my sanctuary from their constant judgment, and now they were using it as a tool to break me. Eventually, the numbness receded, replaced by a dull, throbbing ache. I mechanically cleaned my brush, sealed the paint can, and put everything away. I needed a distraction, something to pull my mind from the abyss. I mindlessly opened my laptop, the screen a glaring portal to a world that suddenly felt hostile and alien. I scrolled through social media, my thumb flicking past smiling families and happy announcements that felt like a mockery. Then I saw it. A post from a local business journal's page. It was a photo gallery from the City Development Annual Gala held last weekend, and there, in the third picture, was my sister, Chloe. She was beaming, champagne flute in hand, draped in a glittering emerald dress. Her arm was looped through the arm of a handsome, silver-haired man with cold, calculating eyes. The caption read, Apex Development's rising star Chloe Vance, with CEO Alistair Finch, celebrating another year of reshaping the city's skyline. I felt a jolt, a flicker of something other than pain. Apex Development. That was the company my mother had mentioned. Alistair Finch. I'd heard his name before. He was a ruthless real estate mogul, notorious for buying up entire blocks for luxury condo developments, often pushing out long-term residents in the process. I stared at the photo, at the proprietary way his hand rested on the small of Chloe's back, at the triumphant gleam in both their eyes. An article was linked below the photo gallery. Finch's Apex Eyes Historic Elm Street District for New Luxury Project. My blood ran cold. I live in the Elm Street District. I clicked the link, my heart hammering against my ribs. The article was vague, citing anonymous sources about a massive multi-year project that would revitalize the neighborhood. It mentioned that Apex was in the process of quietly acquiring key properties to secure the necessary footprint. Quietly acquiring key properties. My parents' ultimatum wasn't just about family favoritism. This wasn't just Chloe wanting my pretty house. This was bigger. It felt coordinated. A small, insignificant detail in the background of the photo caught my eye. It was a large architectural model on a display table behind Finch and Chloe. It depicted a sleek, modern tower complex, and at its base I could just make out the familiar layout of my street, my house. It was right at the center of the proposed development, a linchpin holding the whole thing together. And then I saw the other thread, the one that made the whole tapestry of deceit horrifyingly clear. On the lapel of Alistair Finch's perfectly tailored suit was a small, bespoke pin. It was an antique, a tiny silver falcon. I knew that design. I had seen it before. In the box of old documents that came with the house, there was a faded, sepia-toned photograph of the original owners from the 1920s. The patriarch of that family, a man who lost his fortune and the house in the Great Depression, was wearing the exact same pin. His name, I remembered from the old deed, was Orville Finch. The shock was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. Alistair Finch wasn't just any developer. He was trying to reclaim his ancestral land, and my sister, my own flesh and blood, was his willing instrument. My parents' demand, Chloe's sudden need for my house, it was all a lie. I was a pawn in a multi-million-dollar real estate scheme, and my own family was holding the knife to my throat, ready to sacrifice me for their golden child's corporate ascension. The ultimatum wasn't a choice between my house and my family. It was a declaration of war. The 24 hours that followed the revelation were a blur of incandescent rage. Sleep was an impossibility. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the smug, triumphant look on Chloe's face in that photograph, standing next to the man who was using her to methodically dismantle my life. The anger was a living thing, a feral creature pacing the cage of my ribs. It was a pure, clarifying force that burned away the shock and grief, leaving behind a diamond-hard certainty. I would not break. I would not sell. I would fight. My house, which hours before had felt like a potential crime scene, transformed back into my fortress. I walked through its rooms, not as a victim, but as a queen surveying her besieged kingdom. I ran my hand over the cool marble of the fireplace mantel I'd salvaged from a reclamation yard, my fingers tracing the veins in the stone. I remembered the sheer, back-breaking effort of installing it, the triumph I felt when it was finally in place. I stood in the kitchen, under the warm glow of the pendant lights I'd wired myself, my feet firm on the terracotta tiles I'd spent a week laying. This place wasn't just a collection of assets. It was a record of my resilience, and they thought they could just take it. They thought my love for them was a vulnerability they could exploit, a lever they could pull to get what they wanted. They had fundamentally misunderstood who I had become in the years since I'd left their suffocating orbit. The next morning, I began to document everything. The documentary maker part of my brain, the part that had been honed by years of studying architectural history and a building's story, took over. My own story was now a project. I bought a digital voice recorder and transcribed my memory of the phone call with my parents, capturing every word, every nuance of their emotional blackmail. I saved the article about Apex Development and the photo of Chloe and Finch. I created a new folder on my laptop, labeling it simply, The Case. Then, I called them back. I needed to hear it again, to confirm the depths of their betrayal, and this time, I was recording. My mother answered on the second ring. "Elara, have you come to your senses?" Her voice was brittle, expectant. "I'm calling to understand," I said, my own voice a marvel of calm, controlled precision. I was an actress playing the part of the dutiful, confused daughter. I don't understand why it has to be my house. There are other houses for sale." "We've been through this," she said, her impatience fraying the edges of her words. "Chloe loves your house. It's about sentiment. It's about keeping it in the family." The lie was so bald, so audacious, it was almost impressive. "And the price? You can't seriously think the original purchase price is fair." "Fairness doesn't enter into it," my father's voice cut in, grabbing the phone. "This is about obligation. This is about family duty. Chloe has an opportunity here, a big one. And having a prestigious address in that historic district will do wonders for her career. It's an investment in her future. Your sister is on a trajectory you couldn't possibly understand, and we will not let you stand in her way." An investment. A prestigious address. The truth was leaking out, drop by painful drop. It wasn't about Chloe needing a home. It was about her needing a status symbol, a stepping stone provided by Alistair Finch as a reward for her service. "So my home, my work, my financial security, that's all just collateral damage for Chloe's career?" I asked, the question sharp as a shard of glass. "Don't be so dramatic," my mother sighed back on the line. "You can get a small apartment. You're good with your hands, you can fix up another place. But Chloe's chance, this is now. Alistair, Mr. Finch, thinks the world of her. He's her mentor. He agrees that the house would be a perfect fit." They said his name. They brought his name into it themselves. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. They knew. They weren't just being manipulated by Chloe. They were her willing accomplices, my own parents. I felt a profound, bottomless sorrow wash over me, extinguishing the last embers of hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. This was a conspiracy, and my family were the lead conspirators. I decided to call Chloe directly. I needed to hear the lies from her own lips. She answered with a sing-songy, "Ellie, I was hoping you'd call. Are you going to be reasonable?" The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. "Chloe, why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Doing what?" she asked, a picture of innocence. "Helping Mom and Dad make sure you do the right thing. You've had your little project, but it's time to grow up. I have a real career, real ambitions. I need a home that reflects that. And you owe me." "I owe you?" I choked out, a laugh bubbling up that was half hysteria, half disgust. "What could I possibly owe you?" "Everything!" she shrieked, the victim act dropping to reveal the snarling entitlement beneath. "I was the one who had to deal with them after you ran off to play with your hammers and nails. I was the one who had to meet their expectations, go to business school, make them proud. I did all the hard work. You gotta have fun. Now it's my turn to get what I want. And I want that house." "And Alistair Finch? Does he want the house too?" I asked, letting the question hang in the air. There was a split second of dead silence on the line. I heard her sharp intake of breath. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice was different now. It was tight, defensive. "He's my boss. He's very supportive of my career and my personal growth. He thinks it's a wonderful house, and he agrees with Mom and Dad that you should do the right thing for your family." She was a terrible liar. She was parroting a script, one probably fed to her by Finch himself. The injustice of it all was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. They had framed this as me being selfish, when they were the ones engaged in a breathtaking act of familial piracy. They were willing to render me homeless and financially destitute to advance Chloe's career and curry favor with her powerful boss. The anger returned, cold and pure. It was an engine, and I could feel it revving to life inside me. I spent the rest of the day in a frenzy of activity. I changed the locks on all the doors. I installed a high-end security system with cameras covering every angle of the property. I felt a grim satisfaction watching the technician drill the mounts into the door frames I had so carefully painted. My fortress was now officially a fortress. I gathered all my financial records related to the house, the mortgage documents, the receipts for every can of paint, every bag of cement, every single fixture. I created a spreadsheet, meticulously logging every dollar and every hour of sweat equity I had invested, calculating the home's true current value. The final number was staggering, a testament to my labor and foresight. Seeing it laid out in black and white wasn't just about money. It was about quantifying their attempted theft. It was the monetary value of their betrayal. As night fell, I sat in my living room, the room that had been the scene of my breakdown just the day before. The house was quiet, secure. The world outside could rage, my family could plot, but within these walls, I was sovereign. The pain was still there, a deep, resonant ache for the family I wished I had, for the love that was supposed to be unconditional. But the anger had morphed into something new, something more powerful. Resolve. They had drawn the battle lines. They had underestimated their quiet, artistic daughter. They thought I was a pushover, a dreamer they could easily manipulate. They had forgotten that I was also a builder. I knew how to read blueprints, how to spot a weak foundation, and how to construct something strong and lasting from a pile of rubble. And I would use every single one of those skills to deconstruct their crooked scheme, brick by rotten brick. For 2 days, I existed in a state of suspended animation, fueled by coffee and cold fury. My home was my command center, the epicenter of my one-woman war council. I was surrounded by stacks of paper, my laptop screen a mosaic of open tabs, county property records, legal statutes on real estate fraud, corporate filings for Apex Development. I was digging, but I was hitting a wall of shell corporations and legalese. The threats from my family had escalated from emotional blackmail to outright harassment. My phone was bombarded with texts, alternating between my mother's tearful guilt trips, "You're tearing this family apart," and my father's blunt, angry demands, "You have 48 hours to accept the offer before we talk to our lawyer." Chloe, for her part, sent a single, chilling message. "You're making a huge mistake. You have no idea who you're messing with." It was a threat, and it was a confirmation. This was about Finch. I felt a profound sense of isolation, the kind that sinks into your bones and makes the world feel distant and muffled. On the third day, spiraling into a vortex of despair and paranoia, I knew I needed to change tactics. Staring at a screen wasn't working. I needed something tangible. I needed to touch the history of the house, to reconnect with the reason I had fallen in love with it in the first place. I went to the attic, a space I had insulated and floored but mostly used for storage. In the corner, under a dusty canvas dropcloth, was a heavy oak chest. It had been left by the previous owners, an elderly couple who had sold it to me as is, eager to move into a retirement community. They'd told me the chest was full of old junk belonging to the original owners, the Finches, and that I could dispose of it as I saw fit. I had always meant to go through it, but restoration projects had taken precedence. Now, it felt like an archaeological dig into the heart of my enemy's history. I dragged the chest into the light. The air filled with the scent of old paper, cedar, and thyme. I lifted the heavy lid. It was filled to the brim with yellowed documents, leather-bound ledgers, stacks of letters tied with faded ribbon, and sepia-toned photographs in heavy silver frames. For hours, I sat on the dusty floor, meticulously sifting through the remnants of the Finch family's life from a century ago. I saw photos of Orville Finch, the patriarch, looking stern and proud, his wife elegant and sad-eyed, their children posed stiffly in front of my house. I read letters detailing their lives, their social engagements, their travels. It was an intimate, almost voyeuristic experience. And then I found it. Tucked inside a heavy ledger filled with meticulous, spidery handwriting detailing household expenses was a separate, smaller notebook. It was a personal journal, written by Orville Finch himself. The entries were dated from 1928 to 1929. Most of it was mundane, but as I read, a story of hubris and downfall began to emerge. Orville Finch wasn't just a wealthy man. He was a gambler, and he was in deep with a local crime syndicate. He had used his properties, including the Elm Street house, as collateral for a massive unpayable debt. The journal detailed his desperation, his secret meetings, his terror. The final entry, dated October 30th, 1929, the day after the market crash, was almost illegible, the words scarred into the page. They took it all. Shaw took it. He used the crash as cover. He stole my legacy. My name is ruined. He has the deed, but it is tainted. The south boundary marker is a lie. The survey is fraudulent. God forgive me, my family will never know the truth. Shaw, fraudulent survey. The south boundary marker is a lie. The words leaped off the page. I felt a jolt of adrenaline, a shock of pure, unadulterated hope. This was it. This was the ghost in the machine. This was the crack in the foundation of their entire scheme. I scrambled down from the attic, the journal clutched in my hand. I went to my office and unrolled the official survey map of my property that I'd received when I purchased the house. I compared it with a rough, hand-drawn map tucked into the back of Orville's journal. They were different. According to Orville's map, the southern boundary of his original property extended an extra 20 feet. That 20-foot strip, according to the current city plat, was now a disused public access alleyway that ran behind my house and the houses of my immediate neighbors. An alleyway that was critical. Without that alley, any large-scale development on the block would be impossible. It was the only place for construction access, for underground parking entrances, for utility conduits. If Alistair Finch believed he was reclaiming his ancestral land, he was likely working from the same flawed, official survey I had. But if Orville Finch was telling the truth, if the deed transfer a century ago was based on a fraudulent survey to hide a criminal land grab, then the ownership of that alleyway and the viability of Finch's entire project was in question. My hands were shaking. This was bigger than me, bigger than my house. This affected my entire block. But I couldn't do this alone. I was an architectural restorer, not a lawyer or an investigator. I needed an ally. Someone who knew how to dig, how to connect dots others couldn't see. Someone who would believe me. And I knew exactly who to call. Maya Desai. We had been roommates in college. 2 scholarship kids navigating a world of privilege. While I was lost in architectural history, she was a firebrand at the student newspaper, exposing everything from campus corruption to slumlord practices and off-campus housing. She was now a respected, if feared, investigative journalist for a major online news publication, known for her tenacity and her refusal to back down from powerful people. I hadn't spoken to her in a year, our lives having drifted apart. But I knew she was the only person who would see this not as a messy family dispute, but as the story it truly was. I called her. Ilara Vance? As I live and breathe, she answered, her voice exactly as I remembered it, warm, sharp, and humming with energy. I took a deep breath and the whole story came pouring out of me. The ultimatum, Chloe and Finch, the threats, the journal, the fraudulent survey. I talked for 20 minutes straight without interruption. When I was finally done, breathless and emotionally spent, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Maya, are you there? Ilara, she said, and her voice was electric. I'm booking a flight. I'll be there tomorrow. Don't talk to anyone. Don't answer any calls from your family. Just sit tight. We are going to burn this whole thing to the ground. For the first time in days, I felt the crushing weight on my chest begin to lift. Hope, real and tangible, flooded my senses. I wasn't alone anymore. The ghost of Orville Finch had given me a map, and Maya was coming to help me follow it. The game had changed. I was no longer on the defensive. We were going on the attack. Maya arrived like a hurricane of focused energy. She swept into my house with a rolling suitcase, a laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and an intensity in her eyes that could cut glass. She hugged me tight, then immediately set up a mobile command center on my dining room table, her laptop humming to life next to a portable scanner and a stack of notebooks. "All right, Vance," she said, cracking her knuckles. "Walk me through everything. Every document, every photo, every word you can remember. We're building a timeline of deceit." For the next 3 days, my house was a whirlwind of strategic activity. We worked from dawn until long after midnight, fueled by endless pots of coffee and a shared sense of righteous purpose. The initial hope I'd felt blossomed into a concrete plan of action. Maya was a master strategist, her mind a finely tuned instrument for uncovering secrets. She scanned every page of Orville Finch's journal and letters, cross-referencing names and dates with online archives. She confirmed the existence of a man named Marcus Shaw, a notorious Prohibition-era racketeer who had a documented history of acquiring businesses and properties through intimidation and extortion. He had, indeed, taken possession of the Finch estate in 1929, only to lose it himself a few years later. The property had changed hands multiple times before being subdivided into the current neighborhood in the 1950s. "The fraudulent survey is the key," Maya explained, her finger tracing the hand-drawn map from the journal. "If we can prove that the original deed transfer was based on a deliberate misrepresentation of the property lines, we can argue that the city's claim to that alleyway is void. It should have been part of this parcel all along." Our first move was to find a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but someone who wouldn't be intimidated by Alistair Finch's army of corporate attorneys. Maya made a call to a source, a grizzled old court reporter, and got a name: Evelyn Reed. Evelyn was a semi-retired property law specialist, with a reputation as a giant killer. Her office was a small, cluttered space above a bookstore, filled with towering stacks of legal texts and the faint smell of peppermint tea. She was a woman in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. We laid out the entire story for her, presenting the journal, the maps, and the timeline of my family's threats. She listened patiently, her face unreadable. When we finished, she steepled her fingers and stared at me for a long moment. "This is fascinating," she said, her voice a low, gravelly hum. "It's a legal long shot, a Hail Mary based on a dead man's diary, but it's also the most compelling case of fraudulent conveyance I've ever seen. And the element of familial coercion and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud against you, Ms. Vance, that gives us leverage." Evelyn agreed to take the case on contingency. Her strategy was two-pronged. First, she would file a petition for a declaratory judgment to quiet the title on the disputed alleyway, a legal move that would force the city, and by extension, any interested developers to prove their claim. This would throw a massive wrench into Finch's development plans, tying him up in legal red tape. Second, she would draft a civil suit against my parents and Chloe for extortion and conspiracy, to be held in reserve as our ace in the hole. While Evelyn handled the legal front, Maya and I focused on the investigation. The tension began to ratchet up. A sleek black town car, the kind favored by corporate executives, started making slow passes down my street. Sometimes it would park for an hour at the end of the block. A silent, menacing presence. I knew it was Finch's people. They were watching me, trying to intimidate me. Instead of fear, I felt a surge of defiance. They were worried. That meant we were on the right track. I started talking to my neighbors, people I'd only ever shared polite nods with before. I started with Mr. Henderson, my elderly neighbor to the south, a retired history teacher who had lived in his house for over 50 years. I brought him a plate of cookies and Orville Finch's journal. His eyes lit up as he recognized the name. "The Finches, of course! My father used to tell stories about them. Said old man Finch lost the whole estate in a crooked card game. Never believed it was as simple as the stock market crash." He confirmed that the alleyway behind our houses had always been a point of contention. "Never made sense," he said, tapping a gnarled finger on my copy of the survey map. "The city paved it 40 years ago, but they never use it. It's a dead end. We all just sort of unofficially adopted the space behind our own fences." His testimony, and that of other long-term residents, would be invaluable in proving the alley had never served a true public purpose. Maya, meanwhile, was digging into Finch's business dealings. She discovered that Apex Development had used a series of shell companies to purchase 3 other properties on our block over the last year. all for prices slightly above market value. The sellers were all elderly individuals who had suddenly decided to move into retirement homes. It was a clear pattern of targeted acquisitions. My house was the final critical piece. The real breakthrough came from a source deep inside the city planning department, an old contact of Maya's who was fed up with the corruption under the current administration. After a clandestine meeting in a noisy coffee shop, the source slipped Maya a plain manila envelope. Inside were the preliminary rezoning applications and architectural plans for the Elm Street Towers, filed by one of Apex's shell companies. It was all there in black and white, a massive luxury high-rise that would require the demolition of our entire block. The plans clearly showed the disputed alleyway as the primary access point for a multi-level subterranean parking garage. Without it, the project was dead. We now had irrefutable proof of Finch's motive. The final piece of our strategy was the most dangerous. We needed to definitively link Chloe's actions to Finch's master plan. We needed to get her on tape. Evelyn connected us with a private investigator, a former police detective named Frank, who specialized in undercover work. The plan was for Frank to pose as a high-end real estate investor looking for properties in the area. He would approach Chloe, flattering her, praising her work at Apex, and dangling the possibility of a lucrative side deal. He would express interest in my house, claiming he'd heard a rumor it might be coming on the market, and see if she would reveal the connection to her boss. The night Frank was scheduled to meet Chloe at a hotel bar, the tension in my house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Maya and I sat in silence, staring at my phone, waiting for Frank to send the signal that the recording was complete. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sounded like a threat. The Blacktown car was back, parked directly across the street, its tinted windows reflecting my porch light like a pair of dead eyes. They knew we were planning something. They were trying to rattle me. Finally, at 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Frank. One word. Gotcha. Maya and I let out a collective breath we didn't realize we'd been holding. We had it all. The history from the journal, the legal challenge from Evelyn, the proof of motive from the city plans, the corroboration from my neighbors, and now, the final nail in the coffin. A recording of my own sister, caught in the act of conspiring to defraud me on behalf of her CEO. The net was woven. The trap was set. All that was left was to spring it. The call came as I knew it would. It was my father. His voice was no longer booming with authority. It was tight, strained, laced with a frustration that was nearing its breaking point. Elara, this has gone on long enough. Your mother is a wreck. We are having a family meeting tomorrow night. At our house, 7 o'clock. You will be there, and you will sign the papers Chloe's lawyer has drawn up. This is your last chance. I'll be there, I said, my voice calm and even. The line went dead. Maya looked at me, her eyebrows raised. Are you ready for this? I took a deep breath, looking around my sun-filled living room. The light caught the subtle green of the whispering sage paint on the window trim. A sense of profound, settled calm washed over me. I'm ready to end it. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house, the house I grew up in. It looked smaller than I remembered. The meticulously manicured lawn and imposing brick facade, feeling less like a home and more like a stage set. I walked up the path, my footsteps steady. I wasn't the scared, confused daughter anymore. I was a woman with a purpose. I walked in without knocking. They were all there, assembled in the formal living room, a room reserved for holidays and important guests. My father stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, his face a thundercloud. My mother sat stiffly on the edge of a brocade sofa, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. And Chloe was perched on an armchair like a queen holding court, a smug, self-satisfied smirk on her face. A thick stack of documents sat on the coffee table in front of her. Elara, you're late, my father grumbled. Let's get this over with. I'm right on time, I said, moving to stand in the center of the room. I placed my phone on the mantelpiece, its camera lens subtly pointing towards the group. I'm glad we're all here, because I agree, this has gone on long enough. Chloe rolled her eyes. Oh, spare us the drama, Ellie. Just sign the papers. I'm offering you a clean break. You get the money from the original sale, and you can go start over somewhere else. It's for the best. Let's talk about that offer, I said, my voice carrying a new weight that made them all pause. Let's talk about why you, a junior executive, are so desperate for this specific property. Let's talk about your boss, Alistair Finch. Chloe's smirk faltered. My mother shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Finch has nothing to do with this, she said weakly. This is a family matter, is it? And I countered, letting my gaze sweep over each of them. Is it a family matter that Finch's grandfather, Orville Finch, lost this entire parcel of land in 1929 to a mobster named Marcus Shaw? Is it a family matter that the deed transfer was based on a fraudulent survey? A fact Orville documented in his private journal, which, coincidentally, I now possess? The air in the room grew thick with tension. My father's face paled. Chloe looked like she'd been struck. You don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. Oh, I think I do, I said, starting to pace slowly. I know that Alistair Finch is trying to reclaim his family's legacy. I know that he plans to build a massive luxury high-rise development called the Elm Street Towers, right where my house and our entire block currently stands. And I know that the only way his project is viable is if he gains access to a supposedly public alleyway behind our properties. An alleyway that, according to the original, correct survey, actually belongs to me. I stopped and looked directly at Chloe. And I know that he tasked you, his ambitious little protege, with securing the final crucial property, my property. He couldn't risk a formal offer from his company tipping off the neighborhood to his plans, so he used you. He had you manipulate your own family, your own sister, to pressure me into selling for a fraction of the value. What was your reward going to be, Chloe? A corner office? A big promotion? Or just the satisfaction of finally taking something that was mine? Chloe leaped to her feet, her face a mask of fury. You're insane. You're making all of this up. You have no proof. Proof? And I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. You want proof? I walked over to the large flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace. I took a small adapter from my pocket and connected my phone. A moment later, the screen flickered to life. The first image was a high-resolution scan of Orville Finch's journal entry about the fraudulent survey. The second was a side-by-side comparison of the two maps. The third was a copy of the preliminary development plans for the Elm Street Towers, sourced directly from the city planning department, with my property circled in red. My parents stared, mouths agape. Chloe was shaking, her bravado crumbling. This is circumstantial, my father stammered, his voice losing its conviction. It doesn't prove anything. You're right, I said. It doesn't prove Chloe's involvement. For that, we have to go to the audio. I tapped my phone, and a sound file began to play. The voice of a man, Frank the PI, filled the room, smooth and charming. Then Chloe's voice, clear as a bell, giggling and boastful. No, Alistair is a genius. Her recorded voice purred. He knew my sister would be sentimental and stubborn. A direct offer would have spooked her. But pressure from the family? He knew that was her weak spot. He told me, secure the anchor property, Chloe, and your future in this company is limitless. My parents were easy to convince. They've always thought she owed me. Once she signs, he's giving me a 7-figure bonus and a vice president title. We're going to demolish that whole block and build a monument. The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, and devastating. Chloe collapsed back into the chair, her face ashen, all the life draining out of her. My mother let out a small, choked sob. My father stared at the blank TV screen, his face a ruin of disbelief and shame. Justice, I said quietly, is a funny thing. Sometimes it comes from the law. Sometimes it comes from the truth. I disconnected my phone and turned to face them. The catharsis was not a fiery explosion, but a deep, quiet release. The anger I had carried for weeks simply evaporated, leaving behind a vast, calm emptiness. I didn't feel hatred for them anymore. I felt nothing but a distant pity. Evelyn Reed, my attorney, filed a quiet title action this morning regarding the disputed property line. I informed them, my voice steady and professional. Alistair Finch's project is dead in the water. She also has a copy of that recording, along with a civil suit drafted against all 3 of you for conspiracy to commit fraud and extortion. Maya Desai, an investigative journalist, is preparing a story that will expose Alistair Finch, Apex Development, and his entire predatory business model. Your name, Chloe, will feature prominently. My mother looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. Ilara, please. We're your family. No, I said, the word final and absolute. You are the people who were willing to destroy my life for money and status. That is not family. A restraining order will be delivered to you tomorrow. You will not contact me again." I looked at each of them one last time, memorizing their shattered faces. Then, I turned around and walked out the door, leaving them to sit in the wreckage of their own greed. I didn't look back. As I drove away, I didn't cry. I felt a sense of lightness, of freedom. I had faced the monsters, and I had won. The battle was over. The long work of healing was about to begin. The aftermath was not a sudden, cinematic explosion, but a series of controlled demolitions. Maya's article, titled "The House of Finch: How a Real Estate Mogul's Ancestral Greed Almost Leveled a Community," dropped like a bombshell. It was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, weaving together the historical intrigue of Orville Finch's journal, the dry legality of the fraudulent survey, and the raw human drama of my family's betrayal. The recording of Chloe's confession was the centerpiece, a damning testament to the corporate rot at the heart of Apex Development. The story went viral. National news outlets picked it up. Alistair Finch, a man accustomed to operating in the shadows of shell corporations and backroom deals, was suddenly thrust into a harsh, unflattering spotlight. The Elm Street Towers project was officially canceled amidst public outcry. The city launched an internal investigation into the planning department, and Finch was soon drowning in lawsuits from investors and other communities where he'd used similar predatory tactics. His empire began to crumble. Chloe was fired, of course. Her name became synonymous with corporate treachery and familial betrayal. She took a plea deal in my civil suit, signing over a public apology and a significant court-mandated settlement that I immediately donated to a charity providing legal aid to victims of housing fraud. It was never about the money. It was about accountability. My parents, faced with their own legal exposure and public shame, retreated into a self-imposed exile. They sold their big house, the stage set of my unhappy childhood, and moved to a retirement community in another state. I received a single stilted letter of apology from my mother, full of excuses and self-pity. I read it, filed it away with the other evidence, and did not reply. The restraining order remained my silent, unbreachable boundary. Severing ties with the people who were supposed to be my foundation was the hardest and most necessary act of my life. It was an amputation to save the whole. In the quiet months that followed, I began the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding. Not a house this time, but a life. The house itself became a symbol of the victory. With the quiet title action successful, the alleyway was legally incorporated into my property and those of my neighbors. We came together, a small band of homeowners who had stared into the abyss of displacement and won. We formed the Elm Street Neighborhood Association. Our first project was to transform the reclaimed alleyway. We ripped up the cracked asphalt and, with the help of community grants, created a beautiful shared garden, a green artery running behind our homes, filled with fruit trees, vegetable beds, and benches. Mr. Henderson, with his encyclopedic knowledge of history and horticulture, became our unofficial leader, directing the planting with a joyful, booming voice. He and the other long-term residents, once strangers to me, became my new community, my found family. We held potlucks in the new garden, celebrating our shared history and our collective future. They had seen me at my most vulnerable, and instead of exploiting it, they had stood with me. This, I learned, was the true meaning of neighbor. My own life found a new purpose. The story of my fight had resonated with thousands of people. My inbox was flooded with messages from individuals who had faced similar situations of financial and emotional abuse from their own families. They felt seen, their experiences validated. With Maya's encouragement, I started a blog called The Blueprint, a resource for people navigating family estrangement and fighting for their own independence. I wrote about setting boundaries, the importance of documentation, and the slow, non-linear process of healing from deep betrayal. It grew into a support network, a community of people learning to build new foundations for themselves after their original ones had proved rotten. The documentary part of my narration found its home there. I was no longer just the subject of the story. I was its curator, using my experience to empower others. I still live in my house on Elm Street. It is more beautiful than ever. The whispering sage paint has held up perfectly. The garden I planted in the front yard is thriving, a riot of color and life. But the house is no longer a fortress built against the world. It is a sanctuary, a home base, its doors open to the family I chose. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I sit on my porch swing, the one I built with my own hands, and look out at the peaceful street. I see the lights on in my neighbors' homes. I hear the distant laughter of children playing in the community garden, and I feel a sense of peace that runs deeper than I ever thought possible. I lost a family, it's true. I grieved for them, for the idea of them, for the unconditional love I never had. But in their place, I found something infinitely more valuable: myself. I discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. The strength of a builder who, faced with a pile of rubble, was not afraid to pick up a hammer and start again, nail by nail, board by board, creating something true, something strong, something that was entirely my own. The foundation was no longer in the ground beneath my house. It was inside me.